Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Planning Commission to order for Tuesday, November 9th, 2021 at 7:30. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Fitzer? Here. Mr. Frank?
Here.
Mr. Cusero?
Here.
Mr. McHale? Mr. Nushai? Here. Mr. Pernick? Ms. Redmond?
Here.
Mr. Sanaki?
Here.
Mr. Watson?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a quorum. Agenda item number 4 is approval of the regular meeting minutes from October 26, 2021, our last meeting.
I make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from October 26, 2021.
Second.
I have a motion and support. Anybody have any changes, corrections, additions, deletions? Seeing none, I'll take roll call, please.
Mr. Cusero?
Yes.
Mr. Nushai?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Sanaki?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Frank?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item number 5 is public discussion, items not on the agenda. Is anyone from the public here which wishes to speak? Do we have anybody online wishing to speak? For the life of me, I can't figure out how that thing works. No one is now? Okay, under public discussion then, I will speak for myself as public. And we swore Mr. Frink in tonight to our committee here, and don't take this personal. I think you're a well-meaning man. I've got your application. I've read through this thing because it was left here by one of the councilmen at the last meeting. My problem is the way that your appointment was handled. I don't think it was handled correctly. You turned your application in October 21st, and the application was not received by mayor and council. And according to our charter, mayor and council have to see the applications, and if they wish, they can question you. In which case, I think you saw at the last meeting, I think Sue Moffett said that she didn't see it, and she would like to hold off. They voted you in anyway. So I'm just saying that I think you're a good addition to the thing. I don't think it was handled correctly, and I think that there might be some legal actions down the line, just so that you're aware of that. But absolutely nothing personal. I mean, we got that way. Are we cool?
Well, I have no problem with that.
Okay.
My application was not contingent on who was seated on the council at the time. It was more to have a position on the planning committee.
Right.
Commission, so.
And the seat that you're occupying now used to be held by Andrea Hodges. And she, as far as I can see, I went back through some old videos, and I think in April 27th of 2001, I think that's when she resigned. She left this. So that seat has been open all of this time. So that's why I'm questioning the way that council dealt with the issue. It was an open seat. We're fine with an open seat. Personally, I think it should have been left to the new administration to make their call. But that's just my opinion. So we'll leave it at that. And if no one else in public has anything to say, I will now close public comments. And we will move on to other business. A being the clear zoning ordinance demo. Joe's going to walk us through this, I assume.
Yes, so I'm going to put it up there so that everybody can see what we're talking about. So earlier this year, council approved a project whereby we took the zoning ordinance and converted it into our clear zoning format, which is kind of a multi-stage process. So one of the things that we do when we do a clear zoning ordinance is we reformat the ordinance and we redo the, can you enable screen sharing for me, please? Will?
You know where that's at in Zoom? I'm not seeing it on the screen.
Oh, wait a second. I think it's allowing me to do it now. I think you just got it.
You have to bring a chalkboard in here.
Yep, you got it. Thanks. All right. So, like I was saying, it does change the formatting of your zoning ordinance, but the other and perhaps even the more significant thing that it does is it reorganizes the content of the ordinance. It doesn't change the content of the ordinance. This isn't an amendment necessarily to the content. It's kind of an amendment to the codification format and organization of the ordinance. And what we wind up with after that reorganization is, what you see on the table of contents here. I'll blow that up so it's somewhat visible. We need like a drive-in movie theater screen or something. There's some stuff up front, how to use this ordinance, a use matrix, and a district summary table. That's one element of it. Your zoning map is integrated right into the ordinance. There's actually going to be an interactive component of that once the final document is adopted. And then we have for the ordinance itself this 7-article structure. So we have purpose and intent, and that's some of the kind of boilerplatey stuff that's in every zoning ordinance. It tells you why we have a zoning ordinance, what our statutory authority for adopting a zoning ordinance was, how the zoning ordinance applies to the community, et cetera. That's kind of the most basic content. And it's generally content we don't really have to look at very often because it's just sort of setting up the zoning ordinance as a governing document. Then we have definitions. So all the terminology that's used in the ordinance is defined so that we're precise about what we're discussing in a given provision of the ordinance. The next article is zoning districts. So that's where we actually have all of the districts listed and then the standards for each district, what's permitted in that district, what the setbacks are, the height limit, all that is all in there. And then there's some supplemental standards for the districts that follow. Use standards. So some uses in our zoning ordinance have specific standards that apply to them. So if someone were to, apply for a site plan for that use, we would also apply those use standards to it. Those are all in one article. And then site standards is things like your parking standards, landscaping, lighting, all of that stuff goes in site standards because it affects how a site is developed. We have development procedures, which is what's the process for a site plan, what's the process for a special land use. And then we have finally administration and enforcement. That talks about how the Zoning Board of Appeals works. That talks about your performance guarantees, things like that. Non-conforming uses, et cetera. So we're trying to group like content with like content, essentially. Right now, the ordinance has kind of an ad hoc structure, if you will, where there are a bunch of districts that were kind of stuck at the end of the zoning ordinance because there was nowhere to put them in the middle because of the way it's codified right now. So I've actually gotten calls over the years where people have seen the BRD1 district on the zoning map, but they're like, I don't see this BRD1 district in the ordinance. And I'm like, well, it's because you have to look at the very end of the ordinance where it's not with the other districts. So we've got some organizational issues like that in the current ordinance, and then just other things where certain things are kind of hidden or hard to find. You have a section in your ordinance. It's Division 6, and what that is the area height, bulk, and placement requirements for all districts. I'm going to put that up on the screen here. Gotta pick the zoom. Here it is. So this is what that looks like on the website right now. And one of the problems I have with this is when I'm using it, you see how it says front yard, side yard, and rear yard here. Well, it's a little small, so it's probably hard to see, but that's what it says. When I get down here to the B1 district, and I'm trying to look at these districts down here, I can't remember which column I'm looking at. And that you kind of have to do a lot of like checking back. And then you see there's all these little J's and I's and M's in superscript here. And what that means is that there's another thing you got to look at about this standard. And you have to kind of know to go down and look at footnote I, which says the minimum lot area and width of the and the maximum percent of building coverage shall be determined by the use and the required off-street parking, etc. So one of the things that we've done is we've eliminated that notes section, and we've put all of that content that was in that notes section in other sections with clear titles so that they're easier to find and harder to miss. Because that's one of the things that I've noticed over the years doing lots of development review is that when things are in the footnotes to those tables, nobody sees them. They just miss it. And it's kind of a constant battle of there's actually 6 standards that apply to this site that got missed. So that was one of the things that I really worked hard on was just getting rid of that section and having sections that had real titles and it was clear what the content in those titles applied to. We also have this division structure in the current ordinance where there are 28 divisions, and like I said before, some of the districts are kind of stuck at the end here, separate from the other districts, and we've gotten away from that now. So I'm just going to go back to the PDF here and just kind of take you through a little bit of it. Now this is the draft, so there are still some links that aren't live in it because that's one of the last things we do. And then there's some section references that haven't been changed because we wait until the very end to do that as well because they might move and we don't want to have to change the section references once they move. Okay. So one of the things that is linked is the table of contents. So if I want to go to Article 2 definitions, I can just go right there. There's a table of contents for Article 2 definitions, lists everything that's in that section. So if we have a defined term, it's listed here. Whether it be, something that everybody kind of thinks they know the definition for, like fence, to things that are, a little more technical or rooted in state law, like, for instance, the primary caregiver stuff that council adopted last week after we sent it to them.
And those are hyperlinked, Joe?
Yes, these are all hyperlinks. So if I want to go to the definition for motel, I just click on the definition on the word there, and it takes me right to the definition of motel. And if you've got your PDF set up with the back arrow, you can just go right back to where you linked it from. It's really nice. It's convenient. You can really speed around in a zoning ordinance. If I'm satisfied with what I saw here and I want to go to site standards, I just click on that side tab and I go right to site standards. And I can look at, my exterior lighting regulations right here. And then if I want to go back to the table of contents for that section, I just hit that and I go right back there and I can look at whatever other section I needed to look at, corner clearance or parking or whatever. Wanted to spend some time with the zoning districts this evening. So we've got all our districts listed here. These colors match the colors, or will match. I'm not sure if they match just yet. We might still have to do a little calibration. The colors on the zoning map. So, you know, R1 in here will be the same yellow as R1 on the zoning map. They talk to each other. And within each of these, we have this general kind of two-page spread structure where we have the purpose of the district over here, district intent statement up in the upper left corner here, and then your permitted uses, your special land uses. That's a change, by the way. Right now, we have the term special approval use in the zoning ordinance. But the term special approval use doesn't actually appear in the Zoning Enabling Act. The term special land use is what's used in the Zoning Enabling Act. So we've moved you to the term special land use to match the statute. And then you've got your development standards over here. So your minimum lot size, your lot coverage, your setbacks, building height. Here's how you measure building height. In this district, building height is measured to the midpoint between the peak and the eave. So that's illustrated. And there's a little illustration of kind of how those setbacks are applied on a given lot. And then there's a note here, says see 3.6 for notes to the development standards. That link isn't live yet, so I'm going to jump back here and then actually go to 3.6. And what we have is single-family residential district standards. So there are some kind of supplemental regulations that apply there, and we're just giving you a link right to them so that you see that there's extra standards and you can just go right there and see what they are. And we've got that for every district that has them. So all these sections, most of this stuff was previously footnotes to that table. So rather than having to dig it out, you can go right there from the district spread, and it's right there, and it's got a table of contents title that tells you what it is, supplemental regulations for the office service, 01 and 02 districts. District 3, or Article 3 also includes things like the general exceptions to your district standards. So like voting places are accounted for in there. They're temporary uses that happen a couple times a year usually. Projections into required spaces, things that can be over the height limit like a church steeple or something like that, are all listed in that section. Use standards is fairly straightforward. If you come in and you're looking to do multifamily dwellings, for instance, if you want to do that, here's all the standards that apply to multifamily dwellings in the city. We have 2 districts where they're permitted, RM1 and RM2. And there's some standards that apply in one and some standards that apply in the other. So those are broken out, and then standards that apply in both are grouped first. Right now, this item 2 here with this formula and item 3 with the other formula, those are buried in footnotes. So now they're with all the other standards for that use. Right now there's a section for that use, but it's only got some of the standards for the use. So trying to bring things together and make sure that it's all in one place, easy to access, easy for staff to look at, easy for an applicant to say, okay, here's what I need to do. Again, your site standards, those are, when you're developing a site, here's what you have to do to develop the site. We need a sidewalk, we need frontage on a public street, we need to make sure that you're meeting a corner clearance standard. We have an obscuring wall standard, landscaping, dumpster receptacle, all that kind of stuff. It's all in here. There's some illustrations. Let's see, I think landscaping has some illustrations. Yeah, so Here's where we're showing the 30-foot spacing between trees. This is kind of what your green belt looks like from the side, and here's what your green belt looks like from above. Here's what your green belt looks like in a cross section. And we have a lot of illustrations in the definitions as well. For development procedures, here's your site plan review and approval. So it's what are we trying to accomplish with a statement of intent. Here's the process for approval. Here's what you have to submit with your application. All that stuff is all together. Then special land uses also have a section in that article. We have show cause hearings and condominium development standards in there as well.
And when you talk about the trees, do we have our list on there of what we prefer and what we don't like?
We have the prohibited list of prohibited species in here, and then our landscaping guidelines document, which is referred to in that those landscaping standards, is where we have our kind of preferred list.
That's readily available.
Exactly. We just
Okay.
pass it out when someone applies for a site plan, basically. And then finally, administration and enforcement. So you've got, some basic, here's what constitutes a violation, public nuisance. Ultimately, you should probably take a look at some of this stuff and see if it could use a refresh. But, how are fees set? That's by resolution of council. Performance guarantees, like I said earlier, the zoning board of appeals. When I was going through this, I made a note that there are no standards for what gets submitted with a rezoning request here. So that's something I'm going to be bringing you soon is some standards for rezonings. But that's the basic structure of the ordinance. There's some little buttons down here. If you want to look at the map, you just hit there and it takes you to the zoning map. This little button right here, interactive zoning map, that is ultimately going to take you to an interactive zoning map. It's your zoning map in a GIS application. And what you can do there is you can click on a parcel and it'll tell you the zoning and a little bit of other information about it. And then if you want to see information about the district that the parcel is zoned, you click on a little link and it'll take you to the ordinance, that page of the ordinance on your website. And then I got to talk to you, Nick, about how to make that happen because there's like a thing you got to do with the URL.
When do you anticipate that'll be set up, Joe?
After adoption. So that gets set up after adoption, which, basically we're at a point here where the ordinance is essentially done. So we can have a public hearing on this anytime from our perspective. Obviously, I want you to be able to, review it and things and be comfortable with it and everything before you set a public hearing. At this point, I think we're ready to fix all those old references too, because we've got everything where we need it to be. So that can be done very quickly. But we're kind of ready to roll on this any day now. And Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on it and recommend adoption to council, just like with any amendment. And then council will do its 2 readings and adopt it, and then we'll get the interactive zoning map live, and we'll get it up on the website. And then anytime in the future when we amend the ordinance, we just replace the pages. You guys will get a printed copy of this in your binder, that you have for the Planning Commission. And if we replace pages, what we do is we'll give you printed replacement pages that you can just grab page 4-6 through 4-8 or 4-9, take them out of there, and then put the new 4-6 and 4-9 right in there.
Never works that easily. I can promise you that. I've tried.
So well, we've got it pretty down. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a system. It really works.
No, I
And,
just mean I'll always end up with duplicates or something where I'm
Yeah.
like, why? Yeah. But yes, because mine is outdated, right?
Yep.
But
I think it looks great. Is there a way on that GPS thing that you were talking about to like zoom in and just see all the properties in BRD 3 and then zone in from there to see the specific property, or is...
There may be a way to build that into it, where if you just want to see a particular district, yeah, I think we could probably build that into it. Yeah, just have a
Okay.
little thing on the side. I'll ask our GIS people. I'm not sure that's something we've built into one yet, but I don't see why we couldn't. I mean, it's
It
a
might be
pretty
nice.
pretty versatile app. So
Yeah. And then do you see like a Google Maps type overhead? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, you'll see it's generally an aerial, and then you've got kind of a like transparent overlay of the colors of the zoning districts. So you can, if you zoom in, you'll be able to see what's already on that lot, if anything, and then the color will just be kind of a wash over it.
And sorry, I don't even know
No,
if
that's
you're ready
fine.
for questions yet, but is this
That's cool.
going to be on, is this how to appear on Unicode as well?
It'll actually not be on Municode. So Municode will have a link to this on the city website.
Okay.
So the city hosts it on its own website, and there's no hosting fee for that because the city's got it on its own website. It's very easy for us to update it over time. I mean, a zoning ordinance is the ordinance in your code that gets updated far more often than any other ordinance. So it's nice to have a kind of local control over the updates in that. You probably don't need to worry about most of your other ordinances because they might get updated once every 30 years or something.
Yeah, well, I
But-
do like, so is there, since this will replace Municode, and I'm with you 1,000% on like trying to piece all the little footnotes together, it's
Sure.
like
Yeah,
a
it's
full-time
crazy.
job and lots
Yeah.
of printed paper. But I do like that there's a search button, which is what I used in lieu of trying to not miss anything.
Sure.
Is there that option on this as well?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And so you have, in a PDF, you have a basic search. So you've got find, if you're just looking for a term. Can you see that note? This thing is in the way. Let me get that out of the way. So if you're just looking for a term, if you're just looking for, I don't know, convalescent, I'm not sure if that's a word that appears in your ordinance, but let's say it is. Okay, convalescent home, nursing home, and then you can go from there to the definition. But there's also an advanced search in your PDF reader, and it's available in the free PDF reader. It's one of the reasons that we chose the format is that anyone can put a free PDF reader on their computer, right? And so there's no barrier to entry, like you don't have to pay anything to see it. And the advanced search gives you a lot of options for, you can do some Boolean operators and all that kind of stuff to search for specific phrases, but not other phrases that are similar. If you're looking for the word sign in a zoning ordinance, you'll get the word design, 58 times, and you've got to weed through it all. So yeah, it is very searchable.
So you're saying it's very searchable, but how? Like right now, I've got it downloaded on my laptop.
Mm-hmm.
How do I do that search?
Right, so the advanced search is under edit.
Okay.
You can hit find if it's a real basic search that you're trying to do. That didn't show up there, did it? No, because it's not in the window. But it brings up another little window off on the side, and let's see if I can show you that. Yeah, there it is. So it brings up this little window on the side.
Got
And
it.
it starts out with what word or phrase would you like to search for, but then you can pick case sensitive. So if you're only looking for a capitalized version of the word, whole words only. You can include bookmarks. That's another thing, is that there are bookmarks for every section of the ordinance on the side. So if you're used to, in a PDF program, using bookmarks, they'll be there. I'm sure everybody has different levels of experience with PDFs.
So will
But,
you have like a guide to using
Yes.
it as well then for residents? Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, it's included right in the ordinance.
Okay.
It's that how to use this ordinance right up front tells you how to do all that stuff. And So you can see these bookmarks off on the side. I do this in the packet sometimes, but all the sections are right in there. Some people like to use this as a way of navigating as well. I tend to do this in Word documents, like if you
Yeah,
assign
well,
headers. and
that reminds me
things.
of Muni Code, and sometimes what I do like about it, and I'm just
Yep.
making sure we don't lose any, or there might be a comparable. I like to be able to click a couple of them
Yep.
and then print them. Is there
Oh,
that
sure.
option here as well, just to pick and choose the different things that you might want to print?
You can choose page ranges. In a print
Oh, okay.
output, you probably have to manually input the page ranges, though.
Okay, so it's not like
It's
Muni
not
Code where you
quite
can
like the
click
check
on,
mark
yeah,
thing.
okay.
Yeah, it's not quite like the check mark thing. But it actually gives you the same basic type of menu that Municode has. It's got the exact same functionality over here. If I want to look at vested right, there it is. Or definitions or construction of language. One thing that we did is we kind of focused on some measurement standards in their own section. So when you're looking for like what's gross floor area or building height and all that, it's in a section with the definitions called measurement. So when you're thinking about how you measure a lot or something that's going on a lot, it's all right there, kind of grouped together.
So you're saying whether you measure from like the beginning of the lot line, and those are
Right.
standard for no matter what,
Yeah.
what area? Okay.
Yep.
We had a question came up last month when we were talking about the cannabis and where it's going to be going. If you type in industrial 1, limited industrial, that's on our zoning map. What if you type in industrial 2? Is that going to tell you that it doesn't really exist? It
Well,
exists-
yeah, it won't be on the zoning map. There is a district spread for it, just like you've got a district standards for it now. In your zoning ordinance, we carry those forward. So there's an I2 general industrial district page. You actually have an O2 as well, and a second office district that's not on your map. So those standards are all in there. And in this case, there's so many things listed in it that we actually wound up going to 4 pages for the spread. So the other standards kind of got booted to the next page. Does happen sometimes, especially when you have kind of wastebasket districts where a lot of stuff is just listed because it's not appropriate anywhere else. You wind up with these really long lists of uses.
So if I went to print I2, would it just print just like all of those, or is that what you mean by?
You put
would
the
just
page
click
range
like
in
you
there.
want to, print 76 pages. You'd want to print like 3 through. It would
Right.
automatically kind of want to print all of it, the whole ordinance
Yeah.
itself. Okay.
So, but if you choose a few pages, typically what you can do is print the selection. So if you've got these 3 pages, your I2 information, you could print just the selection if you grab them over here.
Okay.
And you can do that throughout the ordinance. You could pick 20 non-consecutive pages and just print your selection.
Now, are we talking about this outside of the clear zoning? I know you wrote in the packet the CC district. Are we saving that for a different discussion, or is
That's
this
the
kind of?
next discussion,
Okay,
yep,
because, so if this gets approved and moved forward, and let's say someone notices that we're missing something that was in the old one that's not necessarily here, is that something that has to go through a legal amendment type thing in order to be fixed then?
Yeah, if something was truly not carried forward and we adopted this, we would probably have to go through the amendment process to add it back in. Now, we've triple checked this. There's definitely nothing missing, but yeah, that would be the process for getting something back in there if it were somehow dropped.
Okay, because, well, now I'll save the other part, because maybe it's in a different place, but I did notice that there was pieces of the CC that I didn't see there. So, but we'll talk about that during the CC.
Yeah, well, yeah, there is one piece of the CC district that's intentionally not in here. Signs, which is what we're going to talk about next.
Right, but in the signs, I noticed that it's stopped in what you gave us here versus what was on Muni code. So I wasn't
Right.
sure.
And there's a
like,
reason for that.
After I or whatever. So we don't have to repeal every single one that you're moving and rearranging around, right?
Oh, no.
No.
We have the language for a resolution that's kind of readopting your code with the new, it's one motion that just is a real smooth,
And in that,
easy
wouldn't it
motion.
make sense, with that said, to put in some part of that resolution that should there be some type of omission error, that it would be, fall back on the fact that it was a clerical error versus, a legal moving forward without omitting things?
There probably are certain small things that could possibly fall under clerical error. But if there was like a section that got dropped or something, I think you'd want to go through the process to do it right, just to make sure that your bases are covered. Again, it's been checked over and over, and one of the things you'll get is we do a cross reference tracking sheet. So the old section or subsection, its original codification will be in one column, and its new codification will be in another. So you can see the one-to-one of here's where it was and here's where it is.
Oh, okay, but what do you mean by if there was a whole section, you'd want to do it, what do you mean by do it right?
Oh, you've got a new ordinance essentially at that point, and it didn't include that section when it was adopted. If something was for some reason not brought over, you would definitely want to go through the process of an actual amendment to put it in there.
So are we talking, how many things are we omitting as we're moving things over?
We're only omitting one thing, and that's the next discussion, CC signs. And there's a reason we're doing that.
Yeah, but wouldn't the right thing to do then be to make sure that everything is moved over?
Everything is moved over.
Oh, I know, and I trust, I'm not
That's the point.
questioning whether.
Everything is moved over.
But I'm
There's
saying,
one thing we're
should
leaving
something
out.
pop up that there was somehow.
Then we would
it
go
could
through the
even-
amendment process and put it back in there.
Amendment process. So
Yeah.
tonight you're looking for us to say that we looked over the whole thing and we're okay with moving forward, and anything that changes from here on out, we need to amend?
Well, I mean, you don't really have to say that because it's kind of a given.
Okay.
I mean, all you would be doing, if you were comfortable doing it tonight, would be setting a public hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't really have to worry about being that specific about it. You would just set a public hearing, and it's really on us to make sure everything gets moved over, and you're free to check it as much as you want. I don't expect everybody to go through it with a fine tooth. It's a zoning ordinance. I
Right.
really don't expect you to go through it with a fine tooth comb.
Yeah.
Because it's dreadfully boring to do that. And you've got lots of other things that you can be doing with your time. But yes, of course, you can go through it as much as you want. And obviously, if you see something, say something. But I sound like I'm talking about terrorism or something. Yeah, I can.
Well, and
I
I'm not
can
even saying it would be a
guarantee things
mistake
are
by
being
you.
brought
Sometimes
over.
computers,
Yeah.
at least me, they act funky. It's probably just user error, and you're much better than I at that. But, just making it very solid
Yeah.
makes me nervous without having a whole lot of eyes on it to check for maybe a computing error.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but you will get that cross-reference spreadsheet, like I said, that
Okay.
shows here's where it was and here's where it is.
Okay, cool.
Because we keep track of all that. So, I mean, the most we do with the language when we do this is occasionally we'll have to, if there's like a phrase that was embedded somewhere and it's been moved to a new section, we might have to rework the beginning of that sentence for clarity or something like that. That's the most that happens with the language in something like this.
And that doesn't need to be referenced in the ordinance, like I've seen in other parts of ordinances where it's like, it will say that it was edited for this purpose.
Right, that kind of change doesn't really need to be noted like
Okay.
that. It's a more a substantive change that changes the regulatory effect would need to be noted like that.
Okay.
At this point, what would be the sequence of this? Does this go to public comment first, or public viewing first, before it moves on to the city council?
Yeah, so the planning commission holds a public hearing
Right.
and then makes a recommendation of adoption to city council, exactly.
And you say it's ready at this point that we could schedule a public.
Yeah, you could schedule a public hearing
We
anytime.
have
with this,
a
yeah.
meeting on the 30th, I believe, a special meeting.
That, at the moment, yes, we do. We'll be talking about that during the planner's report, but yes, we do at the moment. And also, you have your December meeting is when? Let me get the right date. You have a meeting on December 14th. That's a regular meeting. I was going to talk about this during the planner's report too, but I'm guessing we're hoping not to have the December 28th meeting.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, we typically don't have the meeting the week between Christmas and New Year's, but
Now, can we change the subject of that, since it was already, I believe it was already sent out?
it has
right?
not been noticed yet because
Oh.
the deadline for noticing it is actually next Monday, so it
Okay.
hasn't been noticed yet. The notice is ready to go, but we'll be talking about that during the
Yeah,
planner's report.
and you
so.
don't necessarily think, do we need to have like an extra, that's not on a regular,
That's not a
on
regularly scheduled meeting. I would
Right.
say that you could schedule a hearing on this for the 14th, and that would be fine.
Okay.
Just at one of your regular meetings. But Ed, I think you had a question.
I've written lots of specs, and there's something about when you're writing them, you know when you read. So I guess I'm looking for our legal definition. This spreadsheet that shows one from the other, does that become part of a legal permanent record? How do we know that happened? Because if something fell off and you've got somebody complaining and going to the zoning board of appeals saying this doesn't make sense because all they said that they were changing the language and now everything has changed in the ordinance, we may have made a mistake or we may have done it purposely, but I'm just looking at, you said it was vetted several times, but how do we go this legally? How do we make a recommendation to council that this new format is good? I think it is, but it is content and intent correct based upon the ordinances that we had painstakingly modified for the last
Yeah, I think to the
60, 80 years, whatever it is.
Sure, yeah, right.
80 years.
To the extent that it becomes, a part of a record, it becomes part of the spreadsheet that I'm talking about becomes a part of the record as sort of an exhibit to your resolution of adoption. So it'll be there as part of the permanent record as an exhibit to that resolution.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yep.
I guess I would not know, as a planner here, how to go through and make certain that this was intent correct. It makes sense, it looks better. I guess the other question is this something that most communities are going towards now that we're mostly in this online as opposed to notebook type of records keeping?
Yeah, it's becoming a lot more common. We've done, oh boy, I don't know how many clear zoning ordinances we've done, 42 or something like that at this point.
How many?
42, 45, something. We're in that range now. We're working on one for Grosse Pointe Woods. We just did one for each of the Milfords, the village and the township. Clinton County. What else did we do? We're doing one for Horace, North Dakota right now. That's a wholesale rewrite of their ordinance too. But yeah, we've done a lot of these. And I've seen quite a few communities, for instance, South Bend, Indiana, that have gone to more of this type of format recently. Dallas, Texas has a really nice one too. Fort Worth has a good one. Denver, a lot of like larger cities have gone more this route, this kind of format. Not quite this format. This one's got its own peculiarities. But this kind of self-contained version of a zoning ordinance is becoming much, much more common.
Are the references to this section 34, is that to the legal statute that drives it, and that's why we keep the 34? Because 34 just pops up like there was no 1, 2, and 3. It's all of a sudden it's like 34.
Yeah, chapter 34 is where your zoning ordinance resides within your overall code of ordinances. So your zoning ordinance is chapter 34, I think Article 10, I want to say. Yeah, Article 10. Article 10 of Chapter 34. So Chapter 34 is the land development regulations, and then the zoning ordinance is Article 10 within that. So that's what that Chapter 34 refers to. So every section is 34 dash, whatever the section number is, and it's because it falls within that chapter.
If someone has a statement in a site plan review that says you don't comply, is it easy to go back? How are we going to do that? Is it still going to state some section 34 dot
Yeah.
something?
Yeah.
Is that? But that's not the way that this thing is formatted. You can't. Can you go and search for section 34 dot?
Well, it doesn't
whatever
have,
is?
you don't really have to have it for these section numbers here, where it's like on this page here, this is section 312 of chapter 34. It's not really necessary to have it there, so we would just refer to chapter 313 of the ordinance in a site plan review or something like that of the zoning ordinance, or to section 3.13. That's enough for those purposes.
So has any of the communities you worked with put a stipulation in these reformations talking about possibly the fallback to the Muni Code or already written, if there is some type of, some type of conflict with what's there and what had already been written?
No,
No.
because I don't think it would have any legal effect, because you're adopting a new version of
Okay.
your ordinance. So like a fallback to a pre-existing ordinance, I don't think would have any actual legal weight.
Okay. And do you guys do like a word count study as well when you're doing the side-by-side comparison of, this was here and accounted for here? Do you also do a word count of the original versus the new?
The word counts are pretty different, generally speaking, partly because you've got the various softwares that you can build these documents with don't know not to include like purpose and intent on the side in a word count usually. So it will account for all the words in the margins and other things like that, but it will also, the way that, for instance, the table that has all the setbacks in it is set up right now versus the way that it's presented in the new ordinance. If you were to do a comparison of just that table to all the places that it's presented in the districts, the word count would be just wildly different.
That makes sense.
So yeah, you can't really do a one-to-one on word count. You really just have to have your original references and compare them to your new references, and that's how you account for everything.
And when will we have that? Would it be before public hearing so that we can
it
kind
would
of
be-
peek at it?
Yeah,
Okay.
you could definitely get it before your public hearing, absolutely.
So Joe, your version, when I'm looking at your version online and I'm looking at mine, and mine is downloaded into PDF reader, but it looks entirely different than yours.
So what I have set up is, are you only seeing one page of it at a time, perhaps?
Yeah.
Yeah, so under page display, and what we do is we set this as the default for the document. So it should come up like this automatically once we've got the final version in place. But there's a 2-page view under page display, and show cover page is checked. That's how I get this view. But like I said, we set that up as the default for the final document, so it should show up like that in the final version.
Okay.
Hey, Joe, could you see that I have access to this document?
Yes, absolutely, yep.
Are you looking for a motion tonight to set a public date on this?
That would be ideal, yes.
And you seem to think that November 14th would be a good date to set?
You mean December?
December 14th.
December
yep.
14th, I'm sorry, December.
Hey, Joe, quick question, kind of unrelated, but when you brought up the places of voting, what will happen with, and maybe this is more of a Rennes question, what will happen when, Shalm and those, get sold, and is there like a redistricting kind of thing that happens within the city, or?
That's a
Districting, but new location, new polling location probably, certainly.
And
Yeah.
does that happen, like, where would they place those? Or would we just kind of fill the other locations more so?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps they can, we always go to certain locations, right? Public domains of churches, things of that nature. So I imagine some of the churches may probably fill more of that.
Oh,
need.
okay.
Yeah, you can use that kind, you can use other gathering places like that.
Yeah, that was
yeah.
the word, sorry.
Gathering place.
Yeah,
Okay, makes sense.
I'll say
Okay.
public, but not public, yeah.
Yep, yeah, those are fair game.
I'm still a little confused. Are there areas in this that are not completed?
The only thing there's 2 things in this document that are not finalized. One is the final hyperlinking within the document, which is just a technical matter. And then the other is the final, see right here, there's a highlighted section number. That's the old section reference. So all of those will be updated at the same time now that everything's in its right place.
Okay, because I was just looking for section 34-661, because I found it, and I looked all through the
Oh,
8
it's not,
spots.
yeah, it's not in this document. That's
It's
an
not in
old
the-
section
So that's a
reference, yeah.
hyperlink to something else? Or that's going to be
It'll be a hyperlink within this document. It's just the
to a different,
the reference
to a
needs to be
different paragraph
updated.
reference?
Yeah, exactly. The reference
Okay.
needs to be updated.
So
But
when
we
would you
that
do
all at
that?
once. Later this week, probably. If you set a
Oh.
public hearing tonight, we'd do that later this week.
Got it.
Yep.
Because that makes a lot of sense when you say, and the ability to search, and then if it's permitted over here and you want to read over there, you just are able to do it.
Right. You just go
And
right
I-
there.
And I
yeah.
don't, I've attempted to use that muni code thing a couple of times, and I was not always successful, so, but then it's another one of those things, you use it often enough, you probably get used to it, so.
The
this
search
makes
bar
a
is
lot of
everything
sense.
there on Municode.
Yeah.
That search bar is everything on Municode, I think, because it'll just pop up everything that has it.
I have just a personal question. Is this document created in XML and then converted to a PDF? Or are
That's-
you using a different standalone word processor or tool for creating this?
It's created in InDesign, Adobe InDesign, and then the PDF is generated from there. Yep. Yeah, and you can do all the linking right in the InDesign document. We used to do it in Publisher. Oh my God, that was not enjoyable because you had to stitch it all together and relink everything every time you updated something. With InDesign, all the links are in the document. They automatically update. It's beautiful. It works great.
Yeah, the current InDesign uses XML as the
Yep.
structure for the content.
Yeah, it's very smooth. I'm very glad we switched because the publisher wasn't.
That helps the links be more accurate.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Well, I think it looks great. I like the usability of it, by the way. I think it looks, I really like it.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah, I think it's very well done. I would entertain a motion at this point to
I'll make a motion to schedule a public hearing for the adoption of the clear zoning ordinance for December 14th.
Support.
motion, have support. Anybody else want to change anything or happy with it? Let's let it fly the way it is. Let's do a roll call, please.
Mr. Nushai?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Sinaki?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Frank?
Yes.
Mr. Cusero?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, we have a date
Thank
set.
you.
Mr. Chair, I have one question.
Sure.
Council requested this and knows that it will be back to them
That's correct, yep.
beginning of the year? If, okay, thanks.
Yep. And then we move on to item B. Of moving the city center CMD sign regulations from the zoning ordinance to the sign ordinance. This is a simple move of the location of it.
Yes, so right now you have a sign ordinance that is separate from your zoning ordinance. And all your sign regulations are in the sign ordinance, except the sign regulations for the city center district, which are for some reason in the zoning ordinance. So we think that it makes sense, as long as we're doing this, let's not keep the sign regulations for the city center district in the zoning ordinance. Let's move them to the sign ordinance so that they're with all the other sign regulations. Because it causes problems. I mean, we have people looking at the sign ordinance like, I'm in the city center, I don't see my property here. And we're like, oh, well, that's because it's in the zoning ordinance. So moving them to the sign ordinance just makes sense. It's a very simple thing to do. All you do is repeal it from the zoning ordinance and add it to the sign ordinance. So what you would do is you would set a public hearing to repeal it from the zoning ordinance, and you would recommend that council place it in the sign ordinance. Planning Commission doesn't actually have a public hearing on the sign ordinance because it's not part of the zoning ordinance. It's a general ordinance, but council would then have a first reading on putting it in the sign ordinance and taking it out of the zoning ordinance on the same night, and then they would have a second reading on taking it out of the zoning ordinance and putting it on the sign ordinance, in the sign ordinance on the same night. So it would literally just be moved from one to the other, the effective date of the repeal, and the addition would be the same day. And you would never miss those regulations. They just move from one ordinance to the other.
You need a motion to that effect to send it on to council
To
for
set a
reading?
public hearing, because we have to have a public hearing on taking it out of the zoning ordinance.
Could that be attached to the same public hearing on December 14th, or do you think
It would be a separate public hearing, but yeah, we could do it on that. We could do it on the 14th. Yeah.
On the 14th?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Joe, essentially, aren't we kind of moving a lot of things around? And I'm curious, well, okay, so I'll start with this. As I told you earlier, I did notice that there was I, that was, at least in the breakdown that you gave us, that was not addressed here, and maybe that's moved to a different section of the new ordinance, but the city center district, there's non-conforming uses that are listed under I, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's see, how many are there? 7. And I didn't see those within what was in our packet. So I'm curious, with that said, we're moving a lot of different things. Why does this one need a public hearing versus
It's
all
the
other
only
stuff?
one that's moving to a different ordinance. It's the
To an
only
actual
thing that's
different
actually being removed from the zoning ordinance and put somewhere else.
Okay.
Yeah, so we need to have a public hearing to specifically remove it from the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
Motion that we add that to the same date.
Well, I kind of want to figure out what's going on with the second part of this first, if that's okay. Like I said, it's the very last of it. It's I.
Are you talking about the pylon pole sign thing?
Let's see, pile-on pole sign. I don't see that wording in here, but
I'm just looking for I. Where are you in the ordinance?
I'm in the Muni Code, let's see. Section 341194, you said
Yeah.
you were repealing the whole thing, correct? So
Yeah.
under there, there's the I, which is the very last piece of the ordinance. And there are 7, excluded kind of uses there, or not excluded uses, I'm sorry, but they're non-conforming signs, and they kind of detail what signs
right,
might be
yeah.
non-conforming. And I did not see that in this printout.
Oh, you're talking about the amending ordinance that was included in the packet?
The ones that are on Muni Code, I don't see in the packet, so I don't know if those are going to be omitted, or if when you repeal them, they're still going to show up. Does that make sense?
I'm looking at everything that's in the zoning ordinance under that 1194 is going to move to the sign ordinance. So there's nothing that's intended to be omitted. Let me see. I'm just looking at the amending ordinance to make sure that it's all there. All signs. Oh, it may have gotten cut off. Yeah, it's supposed to be there. It got cut off somehow. I will make a note to add I. That's a good catch, thank you. Add subsection I. Oops. Yeah, I know what happened.
Maybe a motion at this point?
Yeah, I'll make the motion. I make a motion to set a public hearing for the moving of city center CMD sign regulations from the zoning ordinance to the sign ordinance.
Support.
You want to keep it on the same date, December 14th?
I'm sorry, I didn't give a date. Yes, to keep it for us December 14th, 2021.
Who supports that? You support, you'll take that? as-
Sure. Yes.
Any additional?
I have a question.
Sure.
Does that, I'm confused now, and maybe it's just, I don't remember what's going on. When we have done a site plan review, the statement was the sign will be separately handled per the sign ordinance. So when the signage regulation was for the city central district was in the zoning ordinance, did that mean that the planning commission put that as part of their site plan review? And when you move it to the sign section, is that all handled administratively?
Yeah, they were the existing language of section 34-1194, which is the city center signs, says that the signs are subject to the requirements of Chapter 36, except as outlined below. which means that the procedures, because there are no unique procedures outlined here, so the procedures that are set forth in Chapter 36 apply to signs in the city center district, which means that they are administratively approved. Part of the reason that signs are generally administratively approved separately from the site plan is that you could have a site plan that's being done speculatively and there is no sign at the time of site plan to be reviewed. That's one of the major reasons. But also, a business that's had an approved site plan for 30 years might get a new sign, and that doesn't trigger a new site plan review. So they come in and they apply for a new sign, and it's just administratively reviewed. Partly to keep the agendas of the planning commission from getting, stuffed with 12 signs on every agenda. But also just, for the smooth functioning of the city. We have pretty detailed guidance on what goes into a sign. There's really not much discretion about it. So generally speaking, that's handled administratively in most communities.
Except for when it's non-conforming. But non-conforming isn't triggered unless there's a site plan then, or?
The way it's been handled since the amortization period lapsed is that when a site plan comes in that has a non-conforming sign on it, the non-conforming sign is dealt with then. Or if they come in for a new sign, the sign would also be dealt with then.
Administratively,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So they'll know if it's a non-conforming sign administratively?
Yeah, because the existing conditions are required to be shown when they come in.
Is there something that they say, like, my sign is a monument sign and it's not conforming, or?
I mean, generally what they'll do, if they're trying to reuse a non-conforming sign, they'll show the non-conforming sign, and they've shown the height and they've shown the size of it, and we go, well, that's 23 feet tall, and it doesn't meet our sign ordinance, so it's a non-conforming sign. Our sign ordinance says they have to be removed, so we're going to look at bringing you into compliance. And as Ed knows, a lot of them wind up going to the ZBA to try to get some sort of concession. But when someone comes in with a new sign, a lot of times they will be trying to redo a non-conforming sign, and we have to drive them toward compliance. But yeah, they have to provide us with all the dimensions and things, so we're going to be able to tell if it's non-conforming.
Does the planning commission, I'm going to use the term vet, or establish the sign regulations as a recommendation to council, but the planning commission, once the verbiage is in the ordinance, that's good and done, it's all handled administratively?
Yeah, that's how it's worked. And the planning commission did develop the language last time, and the planning commission is going to develop it next time. That's one of the next major things we're going to work on, actually, because there are definitely things about the sign ordinance right now that do not work as well as they need to.
I so well know that.
Yes, you do.
Okay, I can understand how we want to move signs to the sign ordinance. This is making sense. Thank you for the discussion.
Yep.
But where is that process written down?
In the sign ordinance.
In the sign ordinance, there's a preamble that says that the planning commission, works to establish the general ordinances and then gives it to the...
No, that's not written down. That's a matter of policy. City council could choose to take on the sign ordinance if it wanted to. I think they don't have the bandwidth.
I'm willing to bet they won't.
Because there's just so much going on a city council agenda. They don't have
I
time for
guess
that.
I would just ask for that somewhere to be clarified, because as part of the zoning board, I have often referred confusing statements back to the planning commission
Sure.
that says, please tell us your intent.
Right.
Right.
and it's a little bit different. I just wanted to figure out how this was working. Do we know why the city center had signs in it?
I
And it
was
stayed
not the
that way?
planner at the time, so I could not tell you. I wouldn't have done it that way. But it was done that way. So we're going to fix it now.
Okay, I thank you for the pause in the discussion.
Okay, I currently have a motion on the table to open this up to public meeting on December 14th, and I have support for that. Can I have roll call, please?
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Sinaki,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes?
Mr. Fitzer,
Yes.
Mr. Frank,
Yes.
Mr. Cusero,
Yes.
Mr. Nushai.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thanks.
Okay, agenda item number 7 is the planner's report.
Yes, where am I going?
Keeping you busy tonight.
So I'm probably going to tag team with Rennis on this, because the first thing I want to talk about is last week there was an election. On that ballot, there were 2 initiatives, both of which spoke to permitting cannabis uses in the city. As you're probably all aware, both of those initiatives failed to pass. So we've been doing some work recently in the event that they passed that would set up some zoning to handle those uses, when and if they were permitted in the city. They're not permitted in the city at the moment, and I don't think they're going to be imminently permitted either, which means that, some of the urgency has dissipated. We were moving really fast to try to get something in place. We would have liked to be where we wound up a lot sooner, but there were, legal issues and things that had to be worked through before we could get to where we got. So we had a motion at the last meeting to set a public hearing for November 30th to make a recommendation to council on the zoning regulations that we had developed for those cannabis-related uses that could potentially have been permitted if one of those initiatives had passed, or both of them had passed, or one or the other. That was a special meeting that we set up, and we don't necessarily need to have that hearing at this point because the uses aren't permitted, and they're not going to be permitted anytime soon. We have the language developed, and we have maybe an opportunity for members of the Planning Commission to spend some time with that language and think about it in the context of the possibility of another initiative arising in the future, or the city otherwise moving to permit these uses. Now, if that were going to happen, obviously that would be a policy direction that was set by council, and Planning Commission would have a lot of ample warning that they were going to do that. We'd have a chance to revisit it before they did it. But just throwing that out there, I think Rennis has something you would like to say about it. So,
And I'll agree, good evening, I'll agree wholeheartedly. Obviously, for many, many reasons, we certainly feel that we did rush you to a great extent, and there was good reason for it. We also feel that in our attempt to rush you to get to a certain state of affairs for purposes of this ordinance, we don't necessarily feel that we addressed all your questions. You had a lot of questions. I presume you continue to have a lot of questions. Our conversation was hampered in many respects because of the pending vote. Now we're no longer tethered by that. So I think it is important for you to take all the time that you need. This is not going to happen anytime soon, obviously. Take all the time you need with respect to your considerations of this zoning ordinance. I agree with Joe. I think it'll be important nonetheless going forward to adopt something, from this concerning our zoning ordinance, because we don't necessarily feel that it's necessarily a dead issue. I think it's something that may well be coming back before this city. We have time, so time is on our side, thankfully. And I think we're here, Joe, obviously, Gibbles Webster, they're here to help you with anything, any questions you may have. We're finally going to be able to have that more open conversation, hopefully, to be able to assist in your decisions.
You said adopt? You would like us to adopt something? Like, preemptively, though, like, is that what you meant? Like, so it's already standing?
I'm sorry?
Or when you said you would like us to adopt something?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the consideration, what was before you, I think that work needs to continue, going forward. Because even though it would be preemptive work in many respects, I think it's important preemptive work, that should there ever be a time when either, because there's a few ways this could happen, either council decides to do so, which none of us think that that's going to happen, but, the council, chooses to go that route, or that some other initiatory petition comes back, right? We can foresee the need for this work that you've already begun to be completed before then. I think, in my estimation, and I'm not here to give political advice to the city, obviously, but if I'm thinking out loud, this was a municipal election with limited turnout, and it came out a certain way, and, that's great. Going forward, we don't know if an initiatory petition like this, like one of these or these two or something else, comes forward, a different result. You can reasonably expect a different result, perhaps not. Either way, I think it's important for us to be prepared. It's important for those potential designated uses to be outlined in our zoning ordinance.
All of the potential, doesn't it?
Whatever you decide.
Oh, well, so that was my next question. Let's say we get this pretty solid and we can freely now ask questions without upsetting people. And we're able to have things in place and an initiative or a ballot proposal starts, and we have 2 out of, I forget, 8 different licenses. If we put those in place, what happens to the ballot?
A perfectly valid question, and we'll talk about that at length, obviously, as we go through the mechanics of it. But the briefest explanation with respect to that is, I think the legal standard still stands that we will not be able to, on account of our ordinance, sort of get these, zone these particular uses out of town. That's not going to be the standard. But I think reasonable standards that we set will be upheld. And that's why we think that a little more time will be required for this body to make those considerations. You know this city, you know this town, you know the zoning that you have. And the beginning of that conversation that started at least the last few times that we've been here, I think is a great start to start to determine what makes sense, what uses make sense for what district, what uses do not. And we're going to do, I presume this body's going to do the best job that it could possibly do with respect to that. Will there be challenges, to answer the question that that is lurking in the back of all your other questions? Could there be challenges? Will there be challenges? Yeah, perhaps, probably. It's reasonable to assume. But I think if this body is deliberate in its actions, does take the time with these amendments, I think we're going to be in an infinitely better spot citywide as we would have been otherwise. That's certainly the case.
I think I have a 2-part question, sorry about that.
You're fine.
Is it am I correctly understanding that currently the city has a resolution to opt out?
Still standing, yes.
And that's okay. The 2022 is a congressional election in November. There's primaries. You said we have some time. Is it probable that a ballot initiative could be gathered and put onto the primary election? And I don't know, is that in August or May or whatever date it is?
July 20th. I think it's certainly possible.
Yeah.
So when you said we have some time,
Not
it's
all the
not like
time in
we
the
have
world or anything.
7
Yeah, yeah,
years.
yeah.
Okay.
Fair, very fair.
We have several months as opposed to
Right.
the couple of weeks that we were
Right.
working on. So,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yes, thank
That's
you.
my two-part
And
question.
with those initiatives, and I don't even know if this should be brought up at a planning commission meeting, but with the initiatives, I'm assuming what will happen is they'll just keep putting something on the ballot till it passes? Is that what they're gonna do? I mean, kind of what they did with gambling in Detroit. Just keep putting it on the ballot until.
What a fine example, Mr. Watson. It is, I think that's exactly right. I mean, we're trying to predict what people with an inordinate ability to raise fund for an activity or a set of uses that could bring in an inordinate amount of money, what would it take for them to bring those uses forth, and what would it take for them to stop by? I imagine we're going to see. I think we're here because we imagine this isn't the end of it. On the contrary, so I think that's why this body needs to do the work that it needs to do. And thank you for your question, Mrs. Sanaki. Thank you, both of you, for your questions. All of you for your questions. But I agree, the timing issue is critical. I agree with you, and it's not all the time in the world. But some more breathing room to be able to ask those appropriate questions that you were asking last time, that we kept saying we'd love to answer, but we cannot answer because of what's hanging and lurking in the background, and now we finally will be able to answer those.
So I have a question.
That's been easy.
So if we, let's say, adopt one that would trigger an opt-in.
Not necessarily, no.
Okay, no, it doesn't opt in. Okay, so let's say we adopt one use. Would there be chances of petitions for many other things then, or does that open us to many other uses in different ways, or?
Yeah, I understand your question. I think what you're asking, the way I understand your question, correct me if I'm wrong, is does the work that this body will do, does that invite further activity? Is that
Not
fair?
necessarily.
Okay.
Let's say some people might feel strongly about, like, retail is okay, but man, we're all residential here, and grow's really going to affect the neighbors there. So if we adopt a retail, does that kind of, I don't know how to say it, but does that kind of allow us to get more petition, less petition, no result, in terms of someone that wants to put a, A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever, grow over there as well?
Whatever uses you adopt will be the use for our zoning ordinance. They'll be the only potential uses that they can have at that particular district, right? Whatever that may be. If anybody wishes to expand upon that, right, they would have to file some sort of action against the city in order to do so, and I would submit to you it wouldn't be simple to do. So
Action, so that's different than a petition?
I'm sorry, by action I meant legal action. I didn't explain it. So they would have to file some proactive legal case in Oakland Circuit Court to force us, and basically the argument would have to be something to the tune of, you have zoned us out of existence, with improperly somehow, right? Meaning that this district rationally could withstand more than just, this particular license. It should have these other 3 licenses. They also make sense to be here. In its consideration, the Clawson Planning Commission did not consider them properly. They were being narrow-minded, and they just don't want marijuana. That has to be the legal action that gets filed. They must prevail on that legal action in order for the uses that you limit, that you place upon that particular district are expanded.
Okay, so that wouldn't even be able to happen through a petition then? If we have one use, if they wanted to add others, it couldn't even happen through a petition at that point?
Could they have a petition to amend ours? I'm sorry, now I understand the balance of your question. Pardon me.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
that was still helpful, though.
Yeah, yes, they can, of course. They
Oh,
can
okay.
file another petition. You can file, so long as you meet the criteria for initiatory petitions, you can file on any topic just about, any way, shape, or form. We cannot limit that. And that, no action by this body or the Clawson City Council will limit that or will expand that, that right that exists out there. It's state law, it's in our ordinance, it's in our charter, pardon me, it's in our court of ordinance, it's done.
Yes,
It's
no, I
there.
agree. It's a
Yeah.
it's a civil
It's a
right,
thing.
right? Well, it's a right of every
Sure.
individual. But so I wasn't sure if you were saying we would be able to have, you said we'd have more kind of control and be more in the driver's seat, which is I'm
are.
all for driver's seat, Clausen.
We are.
But
We would be.
that doesn't necessarily stop a petition from coming either.
No.
Right.
No, it
Okay.
won't. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the ultimate, the final word, yeah. We would be more in the driver's seat. It is necessary for us to consider doing so. It is necessary for us to do so. Will we stop it? No. I mean, not necessarily. There's a calculation that all of us as attorneys, no matter whom we represent, make when it comes to any legal case that we file. And would they have enough to file the case? I imagine, depending on the district, depending on the limitation of uses, whether it makes sense or not, you can always articulate enough. You can always have enough so that your case is not completely frivolous. But will they have enough to be able to prevail? And I imagine not. I've heard I hear all planning commission meetings, whether I'm here or not. And I know with this body's conversation, usually how it flows. I wouldn't have any concerns given your conversation here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So I guess on that note, procedurally, we have a public hearing on the 30th that's scheduled that we don't need to have on the 30th at this point. So my feeling is that it makes sense to rescind that schedule or that public hearing. We don't really need to do that. We can talk about the date you're going to meet. If you would still like to meet on the 30th instead of the 23rd, I suppose that would be okay. But the 23rd would be our normal date, I guess. So those are really the decisions that we need to make right now is, do we not have that public hearing? Like I said, the notice hasn't gone in the paper yet, so it's okay if we take that hearing off the schedule. And then if we're not going to have that hearing, do we revert to the 23rd, our typical meeting date, or do we still go with the 30th? So your thoughts on that are?
What's the feeling on that? Do we want to meet on the 23rd or the 30th? My preference, I think, would be to go back to the 23rd.
Just stick with your normal date.
I'm with you there.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Do you need a motion to that effect, or do you need a motion to rescind the 30th?
We haven't officially canceled the meeting on the 23rd, so that we don't really need a motion there. But yeah, you would need a motion to rescind setting the public hearing for the 30th, and then you can take the 30th off the calendar.
Okay.
And you can do that in one motion.
So you make a motion I'd like to make a motion to rescind the public hearing on November 30th and have it removed from the calendar?
Yes.
Support.
Or Joe's words exactly?
I supported that. Just
Motion support?
Yep.
No problems? Roll call, please.
Mr. Sinaki?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Frank?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Mr. Nushai?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
yes.
Motion carries.
So the meeting will be on the 23rd, our regular scheduled meeting.
That's correct.
I won't be here the 23rd, just so we're aware.
Okay. Anything else under planners report?
The petition that we sent back for more information, given the theory of what its intended use is that in a permitted district?
I'm sorry, which?
You're talking about 650 Rochester last time? Or-
Yes.
It's in the I-1 district.
No, that was, I thought that was B.
It's in I-1, yeah,
Oh, what?
over on Rochester Road. Yeah, it's on I-1 district.
And we had I-1 and B2?
For primary caregivers,
Yes.
which is now adopted, it'll be in effect. It'll be in effect within the next 2 weeks. because we've got the notice of adoption, I think, is going to run on Friday or something like that, so it'll be in effect 7 days after that. I-1 is one of the districts that's identified in there, and then I-2 by extension, because it includes everything that's in I-1, but of course there's no I-2 on the map. And then BRD2 is the other district, yeah.
And just try to set my mindset, is the pending site plan approval subject to that new ordinance?
Is this the primary caregiver? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out the address on.
This is 650 North Rochester Road.
Your question is, does the new ordinance cover basically, no, because it was filed prior, right? So, and I think that's what I think we may have discussed that portion of it. Yeah, beforehand. So, because the ordinance was not in effect, because it will take effect pursuant to our charter after publishing in whatever, 10 days, because of that, we wouldn't be able to, it wouldn't be covered by that specific ordinance. Anything hereafter, of course.
But they're still subject to site plan review.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
correct?
all the
Like,
rest.
so they're-
I apologize. I was speaking specifically with respect
Yeah.
to, the balance of it.
Yeah, they're still subject to the site plan standards, of course.
Is an indoor grow facility a permitted use in the I-1 district?
No,
Up to 3 primary caregivers co-locating.
Yeah.
It is permitted in the I-1 district, but not a grow facility.
So grow is a term of art, obviously, considering, and it's a term of art that we don't define, that the state defines for us. So that's why your question is, in common parlor, is perfectly appropriate. But because of the standards that the state has imposed upon everybody out here, that question is, doesn't necessarily, the answer is no, but it doesn't, that's not what we're necessarily speaking about, that particular address and that particular application. I don't know if that makes sense.
Have they come back to clarify anything yet? Because I do know neighboring properties, and I thought that they kind of lost interest.
I haven't seen it. Apparently, they did come in with something today, but I'll probably get some clarification on that tomorrow.
Okay.
I guess if it comes back, I'll have a ton more questions.
Yeah, I think we all will at that
That's
point.
perfectly fair, perfectly fair.
Before we leave the plans report, is Joan Horton happen to be on Zoom or YouTube or? Is there Will in there?
I don't see her on the call.
Okay, I don't know who can answer the question for me. The last 2 pages of the paperwork we got here, it's the status of ongoing development projects. I don't know if you've been through that. Who wrote this? My understanding is Joan usually gives this report to us and explains it for us.
Yes, Joan did put this together, yep.
Okay, if she's not available, maybe you can answer a couple of questions, or you could try.
I'll do my utmost, and if I can't answer them, we have a development team meeting tomorrow morning, and I will pose them at that meeting.
Okay, that will suffice. The page 1 here, 115 North Rochester Road is a doctor's office, and the note says violation issued for non-compliance to site plan. Do you know anything about that, or?
So those of you who were on the commission at the time will recall that about a year ago, 115 North Rochester Road came in for a site plan. They were reconfiguring parts of their lot, putting in some planting beds and
Moving some
things.
shrubs around and entranceways.
Yeah, so the city engineer did a site inspection and found that they had deviated quite significantly from the plan that was approved in a lot of the work, and they didn't. I guess they did the work before having a pre-construction meeting, which is a big part of the problem, because the pre-construction meeting includes a review of the approved plan, and here's where everything's supposed to go and what the dimensions are supposed to be. So there's an issue now where they have a non-compliance with their site plan, and there are potentially two remedies for that. One is redoing the work in compliance with the site plan, and the other is amending the site plan and coming in and getting an amended site plan approved. Neither of those things happened at this point. I'm guessing they probably don't want to redo all the work. So we are looking at bringing that to some sort of resolution. I don't know the exact status of it at the moment, if they have responded to the violation that was issued or not. But I can ask about it tomorrow, and we can certainly keep you up to date on it.
Appreciate that, if you can keep that on the radar.
Can I ask another question about that?
Sure.
So let's say theoretically they came back with an amended site plan. Like, why would we look at an amended site plan and even accept it? Because doesn't it just set precedent for everyone to say, oh, just set a site plan and do what we want and then just bring it in amended?
Right. Well, it is one of the due process remedies that's available to them. So that, I guess that's the why we allow them to do that. The Planning Commission would be free to tell them,
We could deny it.
this is denied because it doesn't meet this standard or something else like that. You have to have an ordinance-based reason for denying it. But if there was an ordinance-based reason for denying it, the Planning Commission could absolutely deny it, and then their other option would be to, change the work.
If I remember it correctly, we allowed variances there too, from what I recall.
Yeah, there were some. We were generous in allowing certain existing conditions to guide what happened on the site, because we were looking for an improvement to the site. Ultimately, is the site improved? Well, considering that it was nothing but asphalt before, yeah, you'd probably have to say that there's been some improvement. So, I guess we'll see where we land, how they respond to the violation that was issued. But in particular, I think a lot of the issues are really on the engineering end, because they didn't go through that pre-construction process, and there are going to be some problems there that are going to need to be resolved. We'll follow that, and we'll keep you up to date.
Yeah, appreciate it. We'll keep that one on the radar and look at that closer.
Sure.
My other thing is, who in the city of Clawson currently issues a temporary certificate of occupancy? We used to do it here on the Planning Commission, and remember, that was taken away from us, and that was given on to administration, to the building department, right?
Yes, it's the building official is typically the issuer of a temporary certificate of occupancy.
Who would that be?
His name is Brian Ferguson.
Brian Gorgeson.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, on the last page here, the temporary certificate of occupancy, we got 3 cats. They're still effective. The next one is 288 West 14 Mile, which is Dee Dee's Vintage. That used to be Tribal Fair. That's that little house that went commercial.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Then when they came in front of us, and we decided to let them go back to residential, so now apparently it's going commercial again. And it says here that their temporary certificate of occupancy is in effect through January 31st of 2022. Now, from my recollection, when Tribal Fair was in there, we split their site plan approval into 2 parts, Phase 1, Phase 2. They completed Phase 1. I don't think Phase 2 was ever completed. So as far as I'm concerned, this place is operating without a site plan.
Yeah, they shut down before they could do Phase 2. I believe what the situation is at 288 West 14 Mile is that she's been allowed to occupy the building to start making interior modifications to the building as necessary and get herself set up. And then by 131, she is supposed to be coming in with a site plan. And then her continued occupancy of the building is contingent on getting that site plan approved. That's what I understand is going on there. She's basically been allowed to kind of get in there and kind of start getting herself set up, but she is expected to be submitting a site plan sometime soon, and no later than that 1/31/2022.
She has until 22 to come in with a site plan?
Yeah, so the end of this coming January, yeah.
So we've got a building that's doesn't have an approved site plan. We half approved it, and they never completed the job, and we're going to allow them temporary certificate of occupancy in there. You see why when this came up before, I wanted to keep it on this commission. I
Yeah,
wanted,
you were adamant about that.
I wanted 9 people to look at this, not just one person. One person's now making the decision that, okay, you can go in there and open your business. And unless I saw it on a piece of paper, we wouldn't be aware of this. I don't think that's correct.
Right, well, I mean, I can ask for more information, but, you know,
I mean, the best I think we could do is I could ask for a show cause and force them to come in here. But I can't see letting it go until 2022 here, January 31st, to operate a business in a building that's not approved.
right, well, that's the thing, is I'm not sure that she's actually operating the business,
Had
like
a
having
grand opening
customers
last
come
Friday.
there. I don't know that. Oh, is it?
Grand opening last
Okay.
Friday. I didn't go there, but I saw it on Facebook, yeah.
Okay, yeah,
So there's people coming and going.
yeah, so I don't know what the exact contingencies on the TCO are. But at any rate, I know she is supposed to be coming in with a plan, and because we had a pre-application meeting with her, I don't know, a month ago maybe, where we talked through what her parking requirements are and all that stuff, and she is planning on doing that. It's very similar. What she's planning to do is very similar to what the second phase of the original site plan approval was. Except in this case, that's her phase 1, I guess, is she would just do the site plan.
It's good that she comes into the meeting and talks this thing out, but I strongly disagree with the way that this is being handled, that the building is not site plan approved, and we're allowing somebody to do a temporary certificate of occupancy on there. So maybe I should contact our building guy and have a word with him.
Can I kind of piggyback on that and ask a question, not to put you under too much scrutiny, Joe? I know it's not you, but I've seen and I've heard a lot of residents talk about the snout houses that keep getting put up in Clausen. I've seen, I think,
Sorry, say it again?
the snout house, 3 as of recent that are still under construction. 1 is very recent. Gosh, what street is that?
Snuck by, they beat our
There
ordinance.
are a few
All
that beat the
3 of them
ordinance.
beat our ordinance. I heard 2, but there's another one that just started putting lumber up, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and I'm like, oh, here's another guy.
The
So,
Phillips Road
Phillips.
construction and the North Bywood construction had zoning board of appeals agreement.
That's right, yeah.
To continue construction because they were not informed of the ordinance
Yeah.
at the time that they purchased and developed their
That's right,
architecture.
yeah.
Yeah, they
so it was
snuck
Bywood
by.
and Phillips, you said?
Yeah, Bywood and Phillips.
Those are the 2 that I know that came before the zoning board of appeals.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm not aware
And
of a third.
just for the planning commission as the liaison, the builder and the owners had said, if they had known that that was a requirement, the architect could have considered several other construction layout options on that
Right.
property. The problem was with both of those is they both had construction loan
Right.
in process based upon the architectural drawing that was in place, and it did not, the zoning board of appeals did not think that made sense to deny their continued construction because of, they were at that phase of their
Right.
construction
Yeah.
process.
They were pretty far down the road at that point, yeah.
Are you having another one of your meetings tomorrow?
Yeah, we have a development team meeting in the morning. Yep.
Could you inquire of the building department how this TCO got established? I'd like to get some background on that.
we can bring you a more detailed explanation in the future, yeah.
I don't know if we're happy with just letting it go at that rather than to force them to come in here. I don't want to be
Well,
business
he said they
unfriendly.
have to have a site plan by the 31st of July, 2022.
31st of January.
January
2022.
22.
January, that's right, I'm sorry, yeah, January.
I think.
I would have
kind
thought
of
that they
agree
would have
with
had to
you.
be in December then in order to allow the planning commission to work with the applicant and get an approved site plan by the end of
Right.
January.
Yeah,
If they
yeah,
come
they're gonna
back
have
in
to
the third
submit.
week of January, we may have many more questions because they don't have the information. And then what happens?
Right, yeah, then the TCO
Right now-
expires, yeah.
Right now, with the temporary, they're allowed to run business out of there, and I'm assuming that they're changing interior, decorating, building things, whatever they want, within the reason of the building department, of course, if the building department is watching this.
Yeah.
Yeah, are you able to tell, like, if, like, what permits were pulled or stuff, like, do they?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that the scope of what's going on in there is supposed to be limited to what was permitted under phase one of the other site plan approval. So they're not allowed to do more than what was happening with the phase one of the original site plan approval.
But how do they know
Yeah.
what was required in phase one when we set it up for the tribal company?
Well, I think that's what the stipulations on the TCO actually outline that.
Okay. Joe, what's going on with the church on Main Street? Have we heard from them?
They're having a craft show.
They should be able
I'm sorry,
to.
say
They're having a craft show soon. I saw that,
He
yeah.
hasn't changed his light over to LED yet. He said
No.
he was going to do that in 3 weeks, but he hasn't done that yet.
Right, so
Yeah.
has he done anything that we asked him to do?
He's got a year to do it. We gave him a site plan approval. He's got a full year. That building can stay in that condition until,
I believe he
Next year.
is starting some things.
It looks like he's doing something because he had started the facade already, and it looks like he's working to try to complete that. So,
Okay, so you have noticed, okay.
yeah, so I'm pretty sure the facade's going to be done sometime in the next couple months here, but other elements of it, we're probably just going to have to
those
be
that have been
vigilant.
on here for a while, remember the good old days when Mr. Jim Albus would come in here? We'd have the guy from the building department actually come in here to our meetings, and we could fire questions at him and get responses. I don't know if we should invite our building inspector in to be able to answer questions like this for us. Probably wouldn't hurt.
I think it'd be good.
Jim used to
It
come all
was
the
good when
time.
Jim was here.
Yeah, he could give you a straightforward answer. He knew what was going on around town, whose signs up, down, this, that.
Good for learning, anyway, yeah.
And maybe at the next meeting, well, it depends on what's on the agenda for the next meeting. Might request that he attend it for us. That's about as far as I can go with it. Then where we go from there? We go to staff report and training opportunities.
There's one training opportunity mentioned in the staff report, capital improvement program training from MSU Extension. Of course, we've been doing a lot of talking about this here already recently. But that is the one opportunity that we had for this month.
That's it. And then I'll have legal update if I,
Thank you. Nothing additional. I came to basically what we uttered earlier during the planner's report, I think was my update. I'm happy to answer any questions though if you may have any.
anyone have any legal questions they'd like answered? Seeing none, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting. Do I have to give a date?
Don't have to.
Okay, then I won't.
I'm going to need support, so I have support. Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Frank?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Mr. Nushai?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Sinaki,
Yes.
and Mr. Watson.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
I think that's a wrap.